Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Tyler, you wanted to start buying rentals, but you had a big problem. Tell me what happened.
Sure. Well, I live in Seattle, and the Seattle market is very expensive, so properties don't cash flow. Some people will, people still buy investment properties here, but basically they're making a bet on appreciation, and that's just too risky for me personally.
What about trying to find a fixer-upper that maybe you can buy below market and fix it up? Would that be a possibility?
People certainly do that in this market. That's not really for me. It's not, a skill set that I have per se, and it's just too time intensive. So I'm really looking for things that are more passive.
Tyler did some research and he found some out-of-state turnkey properties that were ready to go. Some of them were brand new construction, some of them were freshly rehabbed, but they were all great rental properties where he could put a tenant in place and start making money right away without having to do any work. On the show today, we're going to talk about how he decided where he was going to invest, how he did the research. We'll talk about what he bought. We'll take a look at the numbers. And most importantly, we'll see how everything's working out for him. Joining us on the show today from Seattle is Tyler Moynihan. We'll take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Tyler. Life insurance is an easy way to give your family peace of mind. It's really a safety net so that if something were to happen to you, you know your family's going to be okay. They're going to be able to cover all their expenses while they're getting back on their feet again. I have life insurance, and it's a really good feeling to know that my family's not going to struggle to pay the bills if something were to happen to me. Some people think they're okay if they have a life insurance policy through work, but what they don't realize is that those policies may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, and they may not follow you if you leave your job. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius knows how valuable your time is. That's why their technology makes it really easy to compare life insurance quotes from America's top insurance companies in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. Policy Genius also has licensed, award-winning agents who can help you find the best fit for your needs. And the great thing is they work for you, not for the insurance companies. That means they're not incentivized to recommend one insurance company over another, and you can trust their guidance. Policy Genius is for parents, caregivers, or anyone else who has people that depend on them. They simplify the process of getting life insurance so you can protect the ones you love. No wonder they have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot. Your family deserves peace of mind. A life insurance policy through Policy Genius can give it to them. Head to policygenius.com to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property, and when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056.
Rental Income Podcast.
Tyler, so what got you first interested in buying rentals?
I made a lot of money on my very first house. And so that got me intrigued. And then, the pivotal moment was we met with our financial advisors, and we were just very unhappy. My wife and I were very unhappy with the performance, and we really felt like we needed to take matters in our own hands. So that's really when I started to deep dive on real estate and try to find the right markets.
And all right, so did you even consider Seattle, or just from looking at the numbers, it just was never going to work?
I did. And for, a couple of years, I looked at properties and kind of, stare at the numbers and see, okay, how can I make this work? But, the cash flow didn't really exist, even before prices ballooned.
That's the problem. Yeah. I mean, when prices start appreciating, the rents just never keep up. And yeah, especially in a city like Seattle, it just becomes very difficult to find something that's going to cash flow. So you decided to look at a town. Um, what like how did you do that? Like how did you decide where you were going to look at a town?
Sure. Well, I kind of drew a line around a circle around Seattle, and then I started looking kind of outward. That was my first step. And I actually remember it's funny. My daughter was probably 6, and I had her kind of color coordinate a map with like price to rent ratios, and basically just kept going and going. A larger circle. Um, and there certainly are properties in areas in kind of Washington, like Eastern Washington. But then I was like, why don't I just take this to the extreme? Why don't I look at the entire country? And so I expanded my search to all the metros in the U.S. And then what I did was I looked at a combination of price to rent ratio, which is data that's easily findable. I found it on Zillow at the time, but you can find it in other areas. And population growth, which you can get from the Census Bureau. So I ended up mashing those two data sets up and then stack ranking metros. And that's how I started.
I mean, there's literally like hundreds of different markets you can invest in. Did you look at every single market in the country, or did you have kind of a short list of places to look at?
No, I mean, I did look at, I in my spreadsheet, I should say, there are hundreds of metros, right? But they're the major metro areas, right? So there's, let's call it 250, 300 major metropolitan areas.
Okay.
And then I sorted the spreadsheet based on what popped up, and I focus on like the top ones. And lo and behold, the top of the list was Dallas Fort Worth and certain areas in Florida, and that's exactly where I started.
And then to learn the market, did you go there to visit, or were you looking online at different information you found online about to learn about the cities?
Yeah, pretty much online. And then I would talk to people in the area as well. So I talked to property managers and eventually the turnkey companies that I ended up investing with.
All right. So how many, like, what was at the top? Like, what were the top cities that came up in your search?
Yeah, Dallas Fort Worth was definitely in the top 5. Orlando was in the top 5. Tampa, Cape Coral, Florida. And so this is basically the 3 out of 4. I never ended up investing in Orlando because I couldn't find an operator that I liked there. But I ended up investing in a lot of those other areas.
All right. So how many areas did you end up buying in?
5 or 6.
5 or 6. Okay.
So, go ahead.
And how many properties did you end up buying?
At the peak, I had 13 properties with 23 units.
Wow. Okay. So
today I have 8.
So what made you want to have so many areas? Like it just seems like it may have been simpler if you had everything in the same area or maybe in 2 areas. Like why did you want to invest in so many different areas?
Well, I didn't invest in all of them initially. So initially I started just in Tampa and Dallas Fort Worth. So I did initially just invest in 2, and then I expanded my horizons outside of those over time as I found better deals in other areas.
All right. So, and you were looking for properties that were ready to go. I mean, you said you didn't want to do rehab projects. So walk me through how you were finding the properties you ended up buying.
Yeah. So once I found a metro that I liked, I looked at, okay, who are the quote unquote turnkey operators in that area? And so there may have been 3 or 4 ones that I looked at, and then I would pick one based on my interviews with them, based on the prices and the cash flow, and then they would send me deals. I would get on their deal list effectively, and I would look at them and pick the ones that I liked the best.
Okay.
And so over a couple months or weeks or months, you end up getting a really good sense of what the inventory is, and you feel and the areas that the properties are located, and you feel more comfortable at that point, knowing what good looks like.
these turnkey companies, these are companies that they buy properties, fix them up, put a renter in there, and then sell it to investors.
That's right.
Right.
And basically, most of them are local flippers, right? So they were flipping properties probably for themselves, and then they realized, okay, they can expand this and get more scale by selling to investors.
Right.
So you're not necessarily buying at a discount. So they definitely make their margin that way, but they do. The rehabs are pretty good. So
Okay.
And you don't have to do any of the work, which is great.
Did you go to visit the properties like before you closed on it, or did they just send you pictures of the properties?
Typically not. Typically I would look online, see pictures, see videos. I might have a third party property manager swing by to make sure that it was that everything looked good.
Okay. Did you get a home inspection?
I always got a home
Okay.
inspection.
Did stuff come up, or were the properties in really good shape?
Yeah, anyone that doesn't expect inspection will see things pop up.
Yeah.
And typically, they're pretty good at fixing them.
Okay. And so as far as like learning the areas, so you find a turnkey company that they start sending you the listings. Like, how do you know, like, without being an expert or being from that area, like, how do you know that you're buying a property in a good area?
Yeah, I mean, again, mostly online. There are lots of sites you can go to. One of my favorites is niche.com. And you can they'll give you a quick, like in 2 seconds, like, is this an A- area? Is it a B- area? And so I wouldn't rely exclusively on that, but that was kind of an initial script.
And
then you look at schools and other data.
And what were you looking for? Like, what type of area?
Well, I mean, an area that cash flowed and that was as high quality as you can get.
Okay, so like a B type area.
Yeah, often they were B, sometimes
Okay.
A- areas.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So the houses are fully rehabbed. I know a lot of turnkey properties, turnkey companies also sell new construction. Did you buy any new construction?
I did. Over time, my strategy started to change. Initially, I started with turnkey rehabs, single family, and then I started to kind of migrate to small multifamilies and new construction.
Okay. And so, like, overall, like, how did everything work out?
Like, overall, I mean, great. I mean,
Okay.
there's certainly bumps, but the equity build out was, tremendous. And, anyone that's invested in the last 5 years has seen the same thing happen.
Yeah.
Rental rates exploded in certain areas. And then, the cash flow was solid.
Okay. And everything was the way that they promised. That if they told you a property was going to rent for $1,000 a month, it actually rented for $1,000 a month.
Pretty close.
Okay.
They may be off by $100. But you can also run your own comps too, and you should. Anyone that does this should, whether you're doing it yourself or through a third party. You can look at, like, okay, what are other properties selling for? What are the rental rates? And then, I use Zillow a lot too, and actually wrote an article about kind of using Zillow for doing analysis that you can share in your
Yeah.
But yeah, there are ways of spot checking to make sure that what they say is true, and you should kind of scrutinize the assumptions and make sure that you're comfortable.
All right. Well, let's take a look at one of the deals and see how the numbers work. So for this first property, it's in Tampa. How much did you pay for the property?
Sure, I paid $117,000 back in 2017.
Okay, and for the financing, how did you finance it?
Just a regular loan.
Just 20% down.
Correct.
Okay.
And then I ended up paying that off later.
Okay, and how did you pay it off?
I just had extra cash, and at the time I was looking at all my properties and the interest rates, and at the time I had a pretty good interest rate. I had 4.7%, but that was the highest of all my at the time of all my portfolio. So I just decided to use that cash to pay a couple of them off, and that was one of them.
Yeah, I mean, when you don't have a mortgage, I mean, you definitely cash flow better, but paying off a 4.5% mortgage, like that's
Yeah.
that hurts today.
Yeah, it hurts today in
Yeah,
retrospect.
yeah. So what did that property rent for?
Sure, that rented for 1,100.
1,100. Okay. And all right, so let's take a look at your other expenses. So you don't have a mortgage on it, but how about for taxes and insurance? How much do they come out to be?
Yeah, taxes were very low in that particular area. And you can find these little niches where it's interesting where property taxes are lower or higher. So their property taxes were only about $100.
Okay. And what about insurance?
Insurance about $100,
Okay.
maybe 150.
And how much was your property management?
8%.
8%. So that's about $88 a month. Were there any other expenses, or is that it? Like, were you paying for water or anything else?
No,
Okay.
besides regular maintenance.
Okay. And how did you? So before the maintenance, so you're cash flowing about $800 a month before any expenses because you don't have a mortgage on there.
Right.
What? How did you budget for repairs and vacancy?
Yeah, I budget that up front when I'm evaluating the property and just thinking about, okay, if I have to pay like a combined 10% for maintenance and vacancy, then, what's my cash flow look like at that point? And so
Okay.
that's how I do it. But after that, I don't really compute it, other than kind of, at the end of the year, I look at like, all the expenses and all the revenue and see if, there are any trends that I should be.
Do you actually put that money aside every month in a separate account, or when stuff comes up, do you just pay for it out of the cash flow?
I just pay for it out of the cash flow.
Okay. All right. Awesome. All right. And now let's compare that to you bought a duplex. And this was new construction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tell me about this property. So was it when you bought it, did they already put renters in there, or did you buy it totally empty?
Well, so this was in Cape Coral. I paid about $360,000 for it, but it was new construction, so the process was different. I bought a lot, then I got a construction loan, and it actually took probably two full years to complete it. So, which was annoying at the time.
Wow.
There's no renter, obviously when it's being constructed, and then in this case, they hand it over to a property manager. It gets completed. You get the certificate of occupancy, and then it goes off to the property manager, and then the property manager fills it up.
So for that 2 years when they're building the property, are you paying interest on the money?
You are, but the good news on this one and other ones, for some of them you just pay your put a deposit down.
Mm-hmm.
So you're only out the deposit money. In this case, it was a construction loan, but as they were building the duplex, they would debit money out of over time, and so you'd only pay in increments. Does that make sense? So you give them a 30,000 or 40,000 or whatever.
All right. So as they're building the property, they're taking draws off your line of credit.
Correct.
And then you pay interest on that. So you're not paying, you're paying interest on a increasingly bigger amount as they build the property.
Exactly. Right.
Okay. All right. So what was the total price on that property?
Yeah, that was $360,000.
Okay. And what did the rents come out to be?
So this is an interesting thing. So the original projections for this were $2,700 total.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like 2 years, passed, and by the time that property is actually complete, the rents had spiked to $4,400.
Wow, that's a huge increase. I mean, that's an extra $1,700.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, I mean that's a deal that when you first looked at it, it was close to the 1% rule. Not exactly there, but you're over 1%.
Yeah.
By the time it's all said and done. That's awesome.
My original cash flow projections were $900, so $450 per side, and I ended up with 2,400, which is way better than I thought,
Yeah.
obviously.
All right. Well, let's take a look at the other numbers here. So how much is your mortgage payment on that property?
It's about 1,100. I have
11.
a 3.5%
Nice.
interest.
And you're not going to pay that one off, right?
I don't plan to.
Good.
No.
Okay. All right. 1,100. And then how much are the taxes?
Well, so the taxes, I still haven't paid taxes yet because it was completed about a year ago, or not quite. And so I was just paying taxes on the lot.
So
I
they
pay
haven't
tax now, but that will go up. It'll probably be 300.
So the county hasn't assessed it yet as a
Correct.
new construction. Okay. Now, what about the insurance?
Yeah, the insurance is interesting. So the insurance is, I pay $560 per month now, and that is set to go up to $700 a month. So it's actually become quite an expense. New construction in Florida, the insurance rates are a lot lower, but even then, like, there are a lot of insurers leaving the state, and because of the 2 hurricanes last year, insurance rates are going up.
That can really kill your cash flow. I mean, that's a huge increase. I mean, you're in good shape here because your rents are so high. But, if you're looking at a deal where you're only making maybe $100 a month and your insurance goes up $150 a month, that you can be underwater on a property pretty quickly.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. And then property management. How much is your property management fee?
8%.
8%. So that's about $350 a month. Okay. So after everything is all said and done, what's your cash flow?
Yeah, it's about 2,300, 2,400.
24. Okay. Awesome. And are you budgeting for repairs the same way as the other property?
But the good news, again, with new construction, one of the reasons I migrated to that is a couple things. One is the home is under warranty for the first year. They pay anything that's wrong, they pay for it. So we actually try to do a second inspection before the year's out to see if I can capture anything that might need to be fixed. But the point of new construction is, the maintenance should be very low, and it's, there've been a couple issues here and there, but much better than the rehab properties. It's just an older property starts to break down, even if it's a good rehab. You start to get these little expenses of $250, $200, $100 a month that just kind of eats into your cash flow.
In addition to his rentals, Tyler is also syndicating large apartment deals. If you want to learn more about what he's up to, I've got a link to his website on my website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 444. I'd like to thank today's sponsor for making this episode possible. It's Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. Chaley is a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of different loan programs. If you want to learn more about how she can help you finance your next rental property, you can track her down at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. Make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button, depending on where you're listening to the podcast, and you'll get notified every single Tuesday when I put out a new episode. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.